Welcome to The Explainer. So, the conflict between Iran and Israel, it's often painted as this really simple holy war. But what if that's not the whole story? Today, we're going to unpack the competing narratives, from divine prophecy to a very, very earthly battle for resources, to try and figure out what's really driving this thing.
All right, let's dive right in. We're going to start with the explanation you've probably heard a million times, the most common one. And then we'll start peeling back the layers to explore some pretty different motivations that our source material brings up.
Okay, so first up is that familiar narrative, the idea that this is just a holy war. It's a really powerful and, frankly, simple explanation, this ancient clash of faiths that was just bound to happen in the modern world. But the real question is that all there is to it?
Yeah, you see these simple divides everywhere, right? Shia versus Sunni, Jew versus Muslim. It's a very neat way to box up the conflict. But according to the sources we're looking at, this neat little box might actually be hiding the most important parts of the story.
And listen, this is not some fringe theory we're talking about. I mean, look at this quote from U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham. This idea of a divinely mandated religious war, it's being pushed at the absolute highest levels of power.
And what's really fascinating here is how this belief connects directly to action. This quote from a pretty influential figure in American politics links the entire conflict directly to fulfilling biblical prophecy. It's a perfect example of how an idea about the end times can shape real-world geopolitics right now.
Okay, but what if all the talk about the divine is just a cover for something much more down to earth? Our sources suggest there's a whole other powerful narrative happening here, one that's way less about Holy Land and a lot more about cold, hard cash and resources.
This statement is, wow, it's pretty fascinating. You've got a Shia woman from Iran, and she's expressing solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza, who are predominantly Sunni. This personal testimony, it just directly challenges that simple sectarian story and grounds the conflict in a shared political reality, not just some ancient religious divide.
So with that in mind, let's look at a completely different origin story. One source argues that to really get what's happening today, you don't look back to ancient scriptures. No, you look back to something much more recent, the legacy of colonialism and the rise of a single global superpower after the Cold War. They call it unipolar imperialism. From this point of view, the conflict isn't ancient at all. It's about challenging that modern power structure. And this source, it highlights a pattern. If you look at recent global conflicts, these three nations, Venezuela, Russia, and Iran, they just keep popping up. So you gotta ask, is that just a coincidence? Well, according to this perspective, there's no way.
And what's the common thread? It's oil, massive reserves of it. This perspective argues the real goal has absolutely nothing to do with religion. It's about a simple, secular strategy. Control the flow of oil, and you control the world.
And boom, here it is. This is where the two narratives just crash into each other. The same politician who, just a minute ago, was framing this as a holy war also explicitly links regime change in Iran to making a ton of money. It's just a really stark reminder of the competing motives at play here.
But the motivations might go even deeper than just resources. Our sources point to another really powerful driver of this conflict, a long-term project to, well, literally redraw the map of the Middle East.
The concept is known as the Greater Israel Project. And according to one of our sources, this is not just some fringe fantasy. It's described as an active, ongoing plan that really influences actual, real-world policy.
And the most ambitious version of this idea, which pulls from biblical text, lays claim to a huge territory. I mean, look at this list. We're talking about all or parts of 7 other modern nations in the region. It's massive. And the sources argue, look, this isn't just some abstract theory. They point to this timeline as evidence. From the state's founding back in 1948 to the occupation of new territories in '67 and the situation that continues today, they see a really clear pattern of expansion over the last 75-plus years.
Now, this geopolitical ambition is powerfully connected to a religious prophecy, and this one is centered on one of the most contested holy sites on the entire planet.
So, according to this belief system, which is held by some religious Zionists, a series of very specific world-changing events have to happen to fulfill a key prophecy. First, the Al-Aqsa Mosque has to be removed. Second, a third Jewish temple has to be built in its place. And third, that event will signal the arrival of the Messiah.
And here is where the political and the prophetic just completely merge. When Israel's prime minister talks about the nation becoming a global superpower,
Well, for people who hold these beliefs, that's not just political talk. It's seen as a tangible step towards fulfilling that grand prophetic plan. So, let's try and bring all these different threads together. We've got faith, we've got resources, and we've got this huge geopolitical project. What does it all mean when you actually put it all together? Well, this brings us to the core argument from our sources. What if religion isn't the driver of the war, but the vehicle? You know, a powerful tool that's used to package and deliver very secular goals. We're talking land, power, resources, all while rallying support for what looks like a holy cause. And that religious war idea gets even more complicated when you look at who post-revolutionary Iran has allied with over the years. As one article points out, Iran has aligned itself with secular, anti-imperialist leaders all over the world, from Mandela to Castro. That suggests its foreign policy is driven by geopolitics just as much as, or maybe even more than, religion.
So this leaves us with two fundamentally different explanations for the very same conflict, and both of them are supported by actual statements and actions from the key players involved.
So it really all boils down to this. On one side, you've got the public frame, a story of faith, prophecy, and divine destiny. And on the other side, you've got a story of power, land, and resources. A very human, very secular war for geopolitical dominance.
And that leaves us with one final and I think crucial question. When faith and geopolitics get this tangled up, who really stands to win from the conflict? The believers or those with much more earthly ambitions?